Well, welcome, Josh. I'm glad we have found a bit more time this time to go into quite deeply into this idea of repeatability in the negotiation process. And I guess to frame it a bit, I'd say t- repeatability isn't about red tape. We're going to dispel this idea that it's about bureaucracy. Repeatability isn't red tape, it's risk insurance. So I've lost count how many times I've heard executives say to me, we don't want to slow things down with too much process. Let's get to the results.
Yeah, there's definitely a degree of resistance here that we face initially when folks are trying to make that decision to get into repeatable success. And I always say, look, repeatability isn't about slowing down. It's about speeding up the right way. So we're taking a little time up front so that we can do things with much more precision and much more predictable success. We want that success to be predictable, and we can do that when we manage our risk appropriately. So when we talk about the negotiation capability model here in today's conversation, we're talking about level 2, repeatable competency.
Yeah, indeed. So repeatable competency, when you're at that stage, you've got consistent organization-wide way of preparing, executing, and learning from negotiations, no matter who's at the table. And there's a fairly well-known phrase in certain circles that says, go slow to go fast. So if we go a bit slower at the beginning, the negotiation, the process not only goes faster, you get better results.
Yeah, it's a lesson I tell my 7-year-old daughter all the time as she goes back to the house 4 times to remember all the things that she didn't pack in her backpack. We have to pack our negotiation backpack appropriately as well.
Well said, yeah.
So let's give a quick recap of where repeatability fits into this whole framework. We have level 1 ad hoc reactive. We've talked about that ad nauseum, about all the flaws of that, although you do get good pizza at 2 in the morning, but maybe you don't want that. You'd rather be home in bed. Level 2, here we're talking about repeatable competency, and this is a proactive approach. This is where my anxiety level starts to go way down because you've got a core process tied to strategy. You measure outcomes and you share learning. And the book, Strategic Negotiation, that we've co-authored here, makes a key point that you can't go from sustainably to levels 3 and 4 without first mastering level 2. You're not going to go from ad hoc to level 3 or level 4. So we have to really think about honing in on level 2, even if it may not be your end game.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's start with this first organizational capability, because again, there are 3 organizational capabilities that we then partner with individual ones. And we really want to stress that missing half of the negotiation puzzle, that organizational set of capabilities is paramount here to being able to unlock our sustainable success. So when we think about strategy, values, and direction, let's illustrate this with an example here. So let's imagine a multinational apparel brand negotiating factory contracts. One division is laser focused on cost, another on sustainability, and a third on speed to market. Without a unified definition of best deal, right, that nebulous term we all hear all the time, they send suppliers mixed messages. And a repeatable process, on the other hand, forces alignment before they ever enter the room. Half of that negotiation is our back table alignment to make sure we are all under the same strategy, the same values, same direction, so that we are prepared to negotiate in a way that is strategic and not just, in our old words, ad hoc.
Yeah, absolutely. Strategy should drive the deal, not the other way around. The second organizational capability is human capital and organizational investment. Another example, picture a mid-sized tech company where salespeople change territories every year. Without a shared negotiation history, a simple playbook, the new rep will tend to reopen settled issues. It'll damage the relationship. The other party will feel jerked around in some way. It will not only waste time, but it tends to confuse the other party. And I like to say the worst thing a negotiator can do is confuse the other party, because then they stop paying attention to you. A repeatable process includes this institutional memory. So history, data, past agreements, and the lessons that each negotiator has learned that everyone going forward can access.
Yeah, that common culture is critical, isn't it, Gary? So the third leg we're talking about here is organizational incentives. And this one conceptually, I think, is pretty easy, but in practice is one of the areas where we see the most misalignment between organizational and individual and trying to get alignment there. So let's imagine, for example, a freight company where bonuses are based on total tonnage moved, not on profitability or customer retention. Here you get negotiators who take on low margin, high risk contracts just to hit volume targets. In a level 2 organization, incentives are aligned with the actual strategic outcomes. So people are rewarded for deals that advance the long-term mission, not just for a raw activity. So in shorthand, what's good for the organization should be good for the individual. And we need to make sure there's alignment in all of that as well, because if the organizational incentives, for example, incentivize short-term gains, but the strategy was about long-term vision, well, we're going to keep perpetuating deals that don't further our strategy, and that's because of organizational misalignment.
Yeah, the stories around this one, are legion in so many areas, where bonuses or profit sharing incentivizes different units within an organization to compete against each other instead of against the marketplace, for example. Those incentives have to be paid quite a bit of attention to make sure that they are aligned with the strategy that you want to see and achieve for the organization. There are 3 individual factors that fit and dovetail with the 3 organizational capabilities as well. So repeatability isn't just about the organization. The strategic negotiation book also looks at the individual layer. So that's fit, knowledge and skills, and individual interests as well.
Yeah, so let's talk about fit. Let's go to my favorite realm here, sports. So let's imagine a pro sports team's hiring a contract negotiator with incredible player relationship skills, but they absolutely hate working with analytics. But the team's salary cap depends on deep data analysis, and this negotiator ignores it time and time again. Even in a level 2 organization, that's a mismatch unless you address the fit. You need to hire people not just based on are they good negotiators, but are they good negotiators in the way you want them to negotiate for your organization?
Yeah, that's such a great point. For example, if you, which is very common, for example, in labor negotiations, management will often hire an outside, typically a lawyer or someone who's skilled and knowledgeable about labor to lead negotiations. And their sole view is, my job is to make sure the union gets as little as possible. And they damage the relationship. They set back, the idea of working together for years, and then they leave at the end of it. And all that anyone can point to is, well, we got a deal, and now we have to live with the fallout for years. It wasn't a good fit for the strategy of the organization. The second individual is knowledge and skills. Knowledge and skills are still important. Training is important. People have to have the skill set. So think for a moment about a regional energy utility negotiating a long-term fuel supply contract. The negotiator knows the commercial terms cold, but has never handled the environmental compliance side. A repeatable process identifies that skill gap early in the process. And so one way or another, the team will bring the right expertise into the room. Without paying close attention to knowledge and skills at the table, we again can find that as a huge gap.
Yeah, and Gary, to your point, any training around negotiation should further your overall strategy around negotiation. So often it's the reverse. You and I get calls all the time. Hey, could you come to a negotiation training? And I think we both handled that call pretty similarly, which is something akin to, well, what are you trying to accomplish? As opposed to, sure, here's my rates and I'd love to do a training for you. We need to do deep understanding of what the organization is trying to achieve. And then that knowledge and skill development and building is in furtherance of that, not a standalone event. So you could say, I did negotiation training, now go at it. That's actually an ad hoc approach, not a repeatable approach.
Oh, Yeah, so often. And of course, how often when you ask the question of, so what are you trying to achieve? You get, well, we're trying to train our negotiators. To what end? To what goal? Well, they need to be better negotiators. And that tells us the organization has not put their mind to what are we actually trying to achieve with the knowledge and skills we're bringing into the organization.
Yeah, great business for entertaining negotiation trainers, but not great business for actually being good at this stuff.
Yeah, indeed.
So third, we talk about individual interests. And here we have to really consider what are the individual interests at play, because we need to understand them in order to also make them thrive within the organization. So here, let's imagine a government negotiator who's passionate about green energy, but the ministry's current strategy prioritizes cost savings. If that interest isn't aligned with the strategy, they may push for outcomes the organization isn't ready to commit to. So again, repeatability includes a prep step that surfaces and resolves those misalignment before the negotiation starts. You know, classic in sport would be the basketball team with mixed motives, where you've got the individual who might be showcasing themselves for the next level, but the team requires a different set of actions at the table for them or on the court. And we need to negotiate that part of it to make sure the individual is aligned with the overall organizational focus. And that's sometimes a two-way street as well.
Yeah, indeed. So here's the biggest pushback that we hear. We don't have time for all that. Building repeatability does not mean adding a 100-page manual or 100 hours of preparation time before you can actually achieve something. Far from it.
Yeah, we know that preparation matters. It matters deeply. And so sometimes it could be as simple as a simple 15-minute pre-brief ritual for every negotiation. You know, can we confirm the definition of best deal tied to strategy, values, and direction? Can we review some relevant metrics, data, and history, maybe past negotiations that happened with the same customer, client, or whoever, so we can learn from those past negotiations, figure out what we might want to do differently this time? Can we agree on some guardrails around concessions and decision rights? Right, those types of steps anchor you at level 2 without slowing you down. In fact, they make you much more decisive because you know what is or isn't in furtherance of your interests.
Yeah. So when we were talking about ad hocery, Josh, we talked about a really simple piece of homework with 3 very simple steps. And I just want to fit what we just talked through into that. So step 1 of that was defining what a good deal is. And that's clearly this part of it here too. But we need to tie it to strategy, values, and direction. So it's deepening that first step. The second step was roles at the table, communication patterns, research, past history. So this is where the relevant metrics and data and history come in. So we as a team have that information and the knowledge before we get to the table. Included in that second pre-bargaining step is agreeing on what are our guardrails, what are the priorities, which issues are deal breakers, and which ones can we trade off when we find out that something that's a little bit lower value to us, maybe nice to have, but lower value, is high value to the other party. And we can achieve what is high value to us at a much lower cost. And by the way, so can that other party. That's what makes long-term good deals. Deciding or identifying who has final decision-making on which parts of this deal. Once those are all in place in those first 2 pre-bargaining steps that we gave as homework in the last one, then we can go to the table and almost guarantee a good level of success because we are well prepared and we know what we're doing at the table. Then in the third step of what we gave you, which is the debrief, we will go back and look, did strategy, value, direction clarify and guide us? Did we gather the right metrics, data, and history? Is there a gap there that we'll learn from and fill in next time? Did we prioritize well, and did our concession guardrails, did our deciding who makes what decisions when, did that help us in the negotiation? Do we need to change something? And that feeds into a cycle of continuous improvement. So those 3 steps really anchor you at level 2 without slowing you down. And what you'll find is they can be very, very simple. But underneath each simple step, depending on the magnitude, the size, and importance of the negotiation, you can drill down, and there are a number of other tools beneath each of those you can expand into if the context warrants it.
Yeah, and look, what we're talking about here is we're raising the floor and the ceiling at the same time, which is a really great place to be as an organization. And we're also reducing burnout. It's surprising. Yes, you have the occasional adrenaline junkie who loves being under stress and duress at the table, but most people would rather be prepared and successful than to be flying by the seat of their pants and hoping that somehow nobody notices that they just made a career-altering mistake along the way.
Yeah, no. So just please remember this: repeatability is not bureaucracy, it's risk insurance. We all pay for risk insurance, and it's a small payment up front to protect against a large loss later on. It's what separates professional negotiators from kind of fly-by-night, seat of your pants, we would certainly label as amateurs.
Yeah, and look, every organization of every size has time for this. If you don't have time for repeatability, then you don't have time for the rework that would come out of doing this wrong in the first place. So all of the costs that come from ad hocery start to get resolved by getting to repeatable, and it puts you in a place. So start with that pre-brief, think about doing better at the table by being more prepared, and then think about all the lessons you can learn from there. And again, it isn't bureaucracy, as Gary said. It isn't red tape. It's risk insurance, and it puts you in a much better place with a better floor and a better ceiling.
Yeah, and we look forward to hearing from anyone who does that homework and gives it a try and see what it does for you.
All right. Well, thank you again, as always, Gary. A pleasure.
Yeah, take care.